Incredible to be standing up here in front of a physical audience. I've forgotten completely how to do this, so we'll see how the next 20 minutes or so goes. Yes, Richard Walters, CTO at Censornet. This is the agenda. If I can jump on one more. Comfort monitor, lovely. So this is the agenda. This is to make sure that I stay on track. There's nothing worse than coming to these sessions and someone talking about something completely different to what it says in the agenda or the conference brochure. So we're going to talk about SASE, but drinking only the Gartner SASE Kool-Aid, if you want to call it that, would be like drinking Pepsi and actually never trying Coke. And the reason that Gartner call it SASE is because they'd missed the boat with Zero Trust. Zero Trust belongs to a Forrester analyst, a guy called John Kindervag, who came up with it back in about 2010, so more than a decade ago. And Forrester today calls SASE the Zero Trust edge. And now Gartner, just to confuse us even more, when we come to the model, you'll see that they refer to the right-hand side of the model as SSE. But SASE encompasses such a range of technologies that you'll almost certainly use a range of products from different vendors. So you'll be delighted to hear me say up front that you cannot and you will never be able to buy SASE from Censornet. So if you think this is a thinly veiled sales pitch, you'll be pleased to hear it isn't. And I guess one of the reasons why I say that it's a framework or a model and you can't buy it from just a single vendor is because it's absolutely down to you and your organisation. Its unique attributes and how you want to implement SASE and what makes sense for your specific business. So it's not a product, it is a model or a framework, and it's a definite case of one size does not fit all. It's also worth pointing out early on that organisations that are reliant on OT or IoT will never be able to reach a 100% SASE state. It just simply isn't possible. So you pick and prioritise the parts of SASE that benefit you. So here it is. This is the model. Almost two worlds colliding in a way. You've got network as a service on the left-hand side. You've got security as a service on the right-hand side that Gartner are now referring to, just to keep us all on our toes, as the security service edge, or SSE. The real challenge is that there are such a range of technologies included within the model, and that's exactly really why it's not a product, and exactly why a complete SASE solution will almost certainly involve multiple vendors. Does anybody know what this is? Come on, someone. Yep, absolutely. So back in the day, you didn't have EPOS terminals in supermarkets and department stores. You'd buy something and the assistant would write out the details of the order on a slip of paper. It would go up through this pneumatic tube system and arrive at a central cash room. And that's where the cash transaction, the actual money would be touched. And then the change, if there was any, would be sent back down to the originating point. The point of this slide really is to say that there's a big difference between the network and the stuff that you send over it. So, as we know, gas is anything but a gas at the moment. It's actually seriously unfunny. But that gas network is owned and operated by Transco. The service is provided by British Gas or EDF or npower or SSE or whoever. For broadband, the network is OpenReach, but the providers are BT, PlusNet, TalkTalk, the list goes on. I think you get the picture. Getting all the packets there and getting only the safe packets there are two very, very different things. So the network vendors are thinking about this very differently from the security vendors. The other point is that just because you can doesn't mean you should. So we talk a lot internally at Censornet about beneficial intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. Cars should take over when you join the motorway. We'd probably all be happy with that. We can sit back as it goes down the boring 400-mile stretch of whatever M road you're on, and then you take back over as you come on to the exit that you want to take. But do we really need software making life and death decisions as we drive through towns and villages? And I'd argue probably not. Tesla and the death of a driver under an articulated lorry that autopilot found difficult to distinguish from the background is probably just the start. And I've seen some coverage today on the train on the way up that actually UK Gov are already moving the responsibility away from the driver of an autonomous vehicle onto the company that built the car or that wrote the software. And SASE is a bit like that, really, in that you adopt the bits that are relevant, but that are also beneficial to your organisation. So the perimeter's dead. It's happened. COVID finally killed it. I think Melanie talked about some of us here have been in security a long time. I joined Digital Equipment Corporation in 1987 when they published the very first paper on packet filtering firewalls. So yeah, I guess I've been in this thing from the start. But the perimeter's gone, and what's replaced it is very much context. Context and identity in particular are very much the new perimeter. Alongside identity, you've got things like location, geolocation, you've got time of day and day of week, geovelocity, where somebody logs in London and then 10 minutes later they attempt to log in from New York. What's clearly wrong with that picture? And SASE, as you'd expect, uses context an awful lot. But this isn't revolution, this is evolution, as most things are within IT and certainly IT security. So the black cloud and the software-defined perimeter were both predecessors to both Zero Trust and SASE. Critically within SDP, device posture and identity are verified before application access is allowed. Then in 2010, John Kindervag, as we've already mentioned from Forrester, published the outline for the Zero Trust security model. And what Zero Trust introduced that was different to the software-defined perimeter is that it includes an element of adaptability or dynamic trust that changes in response to a user's behavior. So we've got context, and I'm sure we already log absolutely everything that's going on within our IT environments. And fortunately, activity, which is that stuff that we are logging, that actually is, over time behavior. And then all we need to do is combine it with context. And it just happens, it was as easy as ABC all along. Not quite, there's a little bit more to it than that, but it's close. So how far out is this thing called SASE? How long have we got before we need to prepare for arrival, I suppose? There's no runway in this vision from the flight deck, and there's a reason for that. SASE is still quite some way out. Fortunately, our marketing team created me a heads-up display. Actually, what Gartner are predicting themselves is that by 2024, actually less than half of organizations will even have a plan to adopt SASE. So SASE itself is even further out than that. It's quite possible that Top Gun 2 might even have hit the cinemas before we get to that point. So there's a journey ahead. And we've tried to depict what that journey might look like in a single slide, in a single view. And it's only important today, really, because at this stage, SASE being that far out, it's nothing really more than a strategic direction. What you can do is avoid taking a turn down any of the dead ends, because decisions made now will determine how expensive and convoluted the journey finally is. If you're about to invest heavily in proxy-based solutions or undertake a major firewall refresh, or if you're increasing your MPLS spend massively, then there's probably a chance you're not on the direct line to SASE. And if you haven't worked out a route yet, then absolutely head for Zero Trust or ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access. That's a bit like Baker Street or Bank, or I suppose I should say Manchester Piccadilly. It'll keep the journey options open. Zero Trust for most organizations will be a very significant waypoint on the SASE journey. So with Zero Trust, it's all about authenticate, then connect. It's turning the way that we've always understood, the fact that we connect and then we type in our username and password. It's absolutely inverting that and turning it on its head. So what the users actually do is they authenticate to this intermediary, the so-called ZTNA controller, where all of that context that we talked about a moment ago is assessed, evaluated before any onward connections to any applications and more importantly the associated data are actually allowed. But just like back in the beginning with Black Cloud, with SDP, every single application is totally invisible or not visible from the internet. So there are three primary approaches to Zero Trust. And Zero Trust is for everyone. It's not just for government, financial institutions, international banks. It is for all organisations of all sizes. You've just got to pick the bits and prioritise the bits that match your organisation, the unique enterprise attributes of your organisation, and what's going to be beneficial. The majority will take a combination approach, so they will actually combine a user and device approach, and because of legacy VPN infrastructure, there will inevitably be elements of the network approach incorporated as well. So it's not quite as easy as ABC, but I've tried to kind of distill it down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is not a bad start maybe. And these are actually based on the words of John Kindvag himself after about a decade of deploying Zero Trust and discussing Zero Trust with organisations in practice. So one of the challenges about the attack surface and defining the attack surface is it's dynamic, it's always changing. Some would argue it's always expanding. So what you can do is invert the attack surface and talk about protect surfaces. Because protect surfaces are smaller, they're much more easily defined, and Zero Trust within your organisation might start with, I want to protect Office 365, or I want to protect Salesforce.com. And you can do that. You can start small. You can start with less critical applications. And also Zero Trust is not binary. So you can implement it one protect surface at a time. It's not a throw the switch on a Friday and wait for chaos to ensue first thing on Monday morning. By taking an iterative approach, Zero Trust doesn't have to be disruptive at all. Mapping flows is fairly self-explanatory. It's all about mapping users to applications and the actions within those applications. Logging into Salesforce is not high risk by itself. Running an all opportunities report and exporting it very, very much is high risk. And then when architecting the Zero Trust environment, you start from the inside out, not the outside in. So you're going to be moving controls closer to the user or down onto the endpoint that the user is using. You're going to reduce services delivered from DMZs and segment users from the data center network. And you're going to log everything, just as we're supposed to be doing today. I won't ask for a show of hands, but logging all user and application layer activity, for one thing, will help with step 5. The Zero Trust policy is all about context. So it's all about using those contexts that we talked about and coming up with conditional rules and leverage existing technologies such as identity as a service or cloud identity and access management, context-aware, multi-factor authentication, and so on. And then finally, it's about monitoring and maintaining and tuning the environment. But we all know it won't end there. So what's beyond SASE? Beyond SASE, we think there'll be another model where security is truly decoupled, where policy and enforcement are entirely separate in a way, and that you set policy once in one place, and then it just gets pushed down, enforced, implemented wherever it's relevant or needed. So Zero Trust first, then SASE or ZTE, and then we'll see where we go after that. I mentioned at the start that Censornet don't sell SASE. We never will. We will partner with innovative networking organizations to deliver SASE solutions, but we'll never do it on our own. We are talking to a company that I believe is the premium sponsor of this event. We don't sell tractors either. We don't sell cars. What we do, I hope, and come and talk to us, we're upstairs, we've got some biscuits on the stand to have with the afternoon tea or coffee when we break. What we do well is deliver services that are accessible, they are easy to implement. We have the mid-market organisations in mind. We're not into large enterprise. If you are 50 users, if you're 25 users, if you're a couple of hundred users, or you're a few thousand users, then really the platform that we've designed has been designed from the ground up specifically for that mid-market, because that mid-market is so massively underserved from a cybersecurity perspective. We are highly innovative, but we don't jump on the bandwagon. When they introduced autopilot, I'm conscious that Tim's talking a little bit later on, so he can talk about flying even higher than pilots of airlines. But when they introduced autopilot into airliners, the only way that they could get pilots to accept the technology is if there was a giant red retake control button. It's a big green retake control button according to the slide. I'll just stick with it. And we absolutely understand that, and we do use AI, within the platform, but again, we don't shout about it. Conscious of time, I think I've got about 15 seconds left, so I will stop and hand back to you, sir.
Good stuff. Round of applause to Richard, please. Thank you. Thanks for that, Richard. Just while I've got you, Richard, you mentioned at the beginning, OT and IoT businesses, you said, will never get to 100% SASE, and that caught my ear. I wonder what I didn't understand why that might be. Can you say a bit more about that?
Just because IoT devices or operational technology, these are largely dumb devices. We're going to hear from Tim later on, obviously, again, and I'm sure he's going to talk to you about the fact that an awful lot of the systems that are sent up into space are using very, very, very old technology. I mean, we're talking, not quite 8086 processors, but certainly 8386 processors are not uncommon in space. And it's very different to take a very modern framework like SASE and move those sort of dumb, unintelligent devices into a fully SASE model. You're always going to need that level of network protection to protect those IoT and OT objects.
Useful.